I'm actually going to talk about the things that I need to do before Mistress can go to the water, so that you'll actually see that honey colour of the hoop pine. It'll have holes similar to the galley cabinets. 3 panels will be required to go around the engine box here. This space here is going to be the fridge freezer. This is what I'm talking about, people. Battens are all cut, they're all painted and ready to go in. Once Mistress gets on the water, man, I want to cross oceans. Okay, well, let's sit down and have an explain chat time. If you're not interested in listening to me rabble on, then by all means, jump ahead to this time. For those though who are interested in this little chat, which is actually going to be different to ones I've had in the past. And the reason is because this one, I'm actually going to talk about where I need to go from here. In other words, the things that I need to do before Mistress can go to the water and be launched. So what I'll do is I'll start from the aft of Mistress and walk through and talk about and explain the things that I need to do in order to be able to get Mistress to a stage where I'm happy to go to the water. You might be able to just see up here, there's a bunch of lists there that I'm working on, and I'm mostly keeping to them. Things have sort of been adjusted a little bit in terms of priority. That top coat painting work was elevated up the list, and I'm very, very happy I did that. But a lot of other things have been going on in the background which you haven't actually seen on a video yet. That will come ahead. Well, just before diving aft to go through those things, what I thought I would do is just talk about what's happening right now. There's always something going on, of course. So the things that I've actually got going on at the moment, I'm almost finished epoxying the little bearers for the shower sump. So that's almost done. And with the latest painting that I've been doing, I've got several panels that will be clear finished. That will be with the all grip. And so the top coat finish for that is going to be clear, so that you'll actually see that honey colour of the hoop pine. And for obvious reasons, I didn't want the insides of Mistress to be completely white. For all those people who, it seems, some of which were feeling a bit anxious about the prospect of the inside of Mistress being white and nothing else, no. There's going to be complements of the beautiful rosewood right throughout Mistress, and of course with the cabin sole, that is going to have that beautiful white beach as well, so that's going to give a lot of contrast. I've got the galley tops, I've got the saloon tops, all of the edges will have nice rosewood fiddles and finished trimming so that all the sharp corners will be removed, and in most cases they'll be clear finished so that that will give a nice contrast to the white. And then I do want to leave some of these hoop plywood panels as features, and yet again, just to complement the colour scheme throughout. Everybody's going to have their preferences, of course, with regards to colouring. Therein lies the beauty that with your boat, you get to choose your colours. With Mistress, I'm choosing colours that suit me. And so I think that it's going to be nice to have some of the panels to be left as that hoop pine, that honey-coloured hoop pine, and then the white will really set that off. And of course, as mentioned many times, this beautiful rosewood, I think, is going to leave a really nice finish. So completing the paintwork is just a matter of a few panels throughout, most of which are already all sanded back, which will just need a wipe with the wax and grease remover, and then they can be top coated with the clear. And there are 2 more things that are underway as we speak. One of which is the stainless steel splashback for the Galley stove oven here. And that's why that paintwork is the way it is. The white delineates where the splashback will finish. And what that means is surrounding the stove oven will be stainless steel. And the reason I'm doing that is so that the cleanup will be much, much easier over time. Another thing that's underway at the moment is epoxy cove gluing that cabin sole in the heads and in the corners of those panels, just to make them nice and rounded in preparation for particularly the sole, fiberglassing that in. So getting the coving done is the first step for that. And I will say, a surprise ahead, people, I'm going to be doing a collab with the affable and hilarious Ross from Life on the Hulls. I really look forward to doing that and putting it together, and I think you guys will get a good laugh too. One thing I haven't mentioned is the electrical installation. I do have the lithium house battery, which is all set up, and the electrical wiring installation continues. And then work that's kind of just started as well, which will be the next phase, is getting the insulation and lining done for cabin 2 and 3. That I'll talk about in a moment. So let's dive into the aft and I'll explain what's going on. The hull lining for cabin 2 and cabin 3. So that's the lining which will be going along the hull here up to deck level, from aft all the way forward until it reaches the bulkhead at this forward end. The insulation and the panels for both cabin 2 and 3 are in progress at the moment. As you can see, there's a bit of black. That is the polyethylene insulation that I've used elsewhere on the lining to compensate for the fact that the spray-on insulation just didn't end up thick enough. So cabin 2 and 3 will get that foam insulation, and then the marine plywood panels will go in. Also down here in the aft area, in the lazarette area, I'm actually going to be making a plywood then fiberglass locker which will go up to that deck hatch, and what that will be is the gas and fuel locker. As you saw in a prior video, I've made up some panels for this aft cabin. There's one, there's two more sitting on top of the stove here, and they will make up the panels that will close off this forward end of cabin 2. What they're really waiting on is I need to make up one bracket for the diesel fuel tank, and then they can go in. So I'm sitting in cabin 2, and this space here is going to be a locker. It'll have holes similar to the galley cabinets, which will lead to shelves similar to the galley cabinets, and that'll be storage for whoever's staying in cabin 2. And as explained before, there are panels that will be left clear finished. This section here is one, and that's the reason that it's only sanded to this point, because beyond there will be inside that locker space. So that strip there will be exposed, and that's why I'm going to have that clear finished. And so similarly to cabin 2, as mentioned, cabin 3 will have the foam insulation and then the two lining panels. And also there'll be one panel which will be going underneath the berth, again with locker holes, which will give access to some storage. The only thing required to finish this nav area is just one panel which will be attached to this hinge, which will make up that leaf, which will hinge up for storage below. The end panel here is finished, but that's left off because I am still finalising some things with the battery below here. But otherwise, this is pretty much finished. And when it comes to the cushion for this nav area, that is another thing that's actually underway. I'm just waiting for the good Heather to finish putting the covers on that, and also the cabin 2 mattress. 3 panels will be required to go around the engine box here, one on the port side here, another one on the starboard side, although that one goes back a little bit further, and the front panel of course. And I can say a bit of a love job really on that front panel is where a beautiful set of rosewood steps as the companionway ladder will be made, and man, I'm looking forward to that. I'm pretty much leaving that as a little bit of a showpiece. And to say that the coaming for the companionway and the companionway hatch, all the coaming for those is already made. I haven't installed them yet because although I haven't really mentioned it, once this interior work has been done on the fit out, I will be giving Mistress a complete repaint on the outside, which will include the decks. And so I'm not going to be fitting anything onto the outside yet until she's had a complete repaint. On with the show, folks. And so this space here is going to be the fridge freezer. What I will be doing is pretty much dividing it down the middle. In other words, half that way will be fridge or freezer, and then the other half will be the opposite. So that's what that space, for all those who might have been wondering what's happening there, that's the fridge freezer. The compressor pump for this will actually be sited underneath the oven, which will have a marine ply panel, possibly some reflective insulation underneath as well. I don't really think heat's going to be an issue actually, because the stove, which you would have seen when I was in cabin 2 here, which just to say, after the splashback goes in, that stove will be able to be hung, but that's not that deep actually. So there's going to be quite a height difference between the underside of the stove and the panel below. And of course, heat rises. But anyway, back to this area. So this fridge freezer I will be making, that's likely to be plywood and then insulation and fiberglass. But I will be making that as a separate unit, which will actually just slide in there and then I'll bolt it in place. Overhead cabinets will go in above this fridge freezer, the same as in the galley area. That will be having overhead cupboards against the hull there, but they are not on the list to be done before Mistress is launched. And as I said, the cabin sole is all underway. The epoxy coving is happening on the inside of the panels on the corners as well, and also that sump for the shower. So that's all underway. What I do need to do in here though is to make a cabinet which will hold the sink and provide a bit of storage in there. So on that list is to make that cabinet top and front. There will be overhead cabinets above as well, but like the galley and the fridge freezer, that can wait for later. And likely when I'm making up the cabinet top there, I will make a pedestal for the seat to sit on. Also to mention, up in this aft corner, I will be installing a holding tank. And as part of the clear finishing, these cabinet doors are also going to be done at the same time, and that's why they've sort of come to a bit of a halt. So they are also on the list. When all these other panels will be clear finished, they will be done as well. And man, I'm really looking forward to putting those inserts in and hanging those. I've already got the 316 stainless steel hinges, but I think once they hang up, the black and the rosewood against that white, this is what I'm talking about, people. The contrasts are really going to make a statement. Behind the saloon seating here, I haven't yet put in 2 dividers for each side, which will actually provide support for these long backs. So they need to go in, and also I'll be making a top which will actually close up that storage space behind each side. I've already got the little hatch doors and hinges. They'll go in after I've made those 2 little dividers and the tops, which is quite a small job. And the other thing while I'm doing that, I'll likely just make up a fairly narrow breakfast bar top for on top of this bulkhead between the saloon and the galley. At a later stage, like with other areas, there'll be overhead cabinets on the port and starboard sides, but on the forward end here, on each side, I'm likely to just make some bookshelving. And that brings us to the V-Berth. I won't bother filming in there, but to say that that is the last area after this clear finishing to be done, what I'm calling part 4. So most of that will also go white with the contrast of 1 or 2 panels left as the hoop honey colour, accentuated of course with some beautiful rosewood. In there also, but at a later date, I will be making up a little cabinet on the port side, but on each side, like the cabin 2 area, they'll have locker hatches to access storage on shelving on each side. And then that leaves the very last area, which is the anchor locker space. That needs to be repainted, so that will get a good sand and then 2 more coats of the good Jotun high build undercoat, and then top coated. And then after that, I've decided that I'm going to just get some insertion rubber in order to protect that area from the anchor chain. I did kind of mention that the plan was to be getting more of this WRC VJ lining in. That did come to a bit of a halt at the expense of getting on with this painting. I'm not worried about that because that is actually quite easy to put in, especially now that this longer area is done in this main central area of Mistress. So I'm not too worried about it, but I've got those battens all cut up. They are ready to go in. I've got a whole batch of the panelling painted, so that will actually be pretty light work to go ahead and get that heads and the V-Berth main coach roof areas panelled. And so I'll just see how I go about fitting that in, maybe between some other jobs. But as I say, battens are all cut, they're all painted and ready to go in. I'll just have a quick look at my list. Yeah, it seems that I got there. That was quite a few minutes of talk there, and congratulations to all of you who have stayed tuned in. But I just thought it would be useful to give some sort of idea about the forward planning that I've got so that you can have some sort of idea about what I'm doing. And also to say, yes, there is method in my madness of planning. And as this is the first boat that I've ever built, especially a boat the size of Mistress, I think it's fair to say that without having done this before, once you get started, you discover things and learn things, and the priority list is somewhat fluid, moving up and down. So I've had to do that. I've had to adjust things in order to do things for me that has seemed to be easier, rather than just stick to one plan that I made months ago and not worry about other things, staying a little bit too focused on the job at hand. I'm glad that I have adjusted things along the way, because sometimes putting something on hold to do something else makes that job a lot easier, and then coming in afterwards and getting back to that prior job is also easier. At this point, people, I am hot. Whew, another hot day, but I'm glad I've got to the end of it. I do think I've done a fairly concise job of letting you know about where I'm headed and the jobs at hand. And on that note, I'm going to go down below, get a nice icy cold beer and wet this whistle because my mouth is dry. I do hope that that might have been some good food for thought for some people who might be considering or even doing some boatwork jobs. And for everybody else, I hope that it might have given you an idea that I do have plans and that I am forging ahead to get Mistress in the water, because that, after all, is the whole reason why I'm going to all of this trouble, is to get Mistress to a stage where she's been built to a high standard so that when she does get onto the seas, I'm not going to be spending my time in harbours or in marinas or up on the hard fixing jobs that I could have done better at this stage, which is why I'm putting all the time into this. Once Mistress gets on the water, man, I want to cross oceans. So here we go, people. A little reward along the way. That's rewarding. And to say, everybody, we are getting there. We're getting there. Can I ask you to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't, and please check out my website. And of course, leave a comment, because I like reading what you have to say.